Hey, what's up guys? Sir Amanon here, and today I'm actually going to be going over all the new OCG imports out of Duel Overload. So first off, I apologize that I haven't been uploading in a bit. I'm still in the process of recovering from being sick over the past weekend, and you might be able to hear it in my voice as well. But I really want to record videos. I've been wanting to, and I tried yesterday, but I just kept coughing. Hopefully it goes better today. But yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read all these cards and tell you guys what I think. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So first card we have here is some of the names are obviously going to be changed. So I'm just gonna put the names like up in the corner here. So this is actually gonna be called Engracum Umbrella. Engracum means it's like a type of orchid. It's like a plant, which is kind of funny because it's a spellcaster monster. But anyways, it reads, when this card is normal summoned, you can discard one card and then target one level 4 lower monster in your graveyard. Special summon it but negate its effects, and also you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except Synchro monsters. This card's okay. It reminds me of kind of like Junk Synchron, but the problem is that card is, I feel, a lot more readily searchable than this one. And I feel like Synchro spam decks are already, like, they already have enough like normal summons to where like they'd be more impactful than this card. So I'm not entirely sure what the utility of this card would be. It's a pretty interesting thought, but I think that a lot of people are just going to stick to existing Synchro options personally. Next up, we got Possessed Awakening, or it's going to be called Awakening of the Possessed. So yeah, this card is pretty interesting because I'm not actually familiar with the Possessed archetype at all, but it reads, monsters you control gain 300 attack for each different attribute you control. Charmer and familiar possessed monsters you control cannot be destroyed by card effects. If a spellcaster monster whose original attack is 1850 is normal or special summoned to your field, draw one card. You can only use this effect of Awakening of the Possessed once per turn. So that is pretty interesting because spellcasters with 1850 attack, a good option that comes to mind is Fairy Tale Luna. And Luna control is something that people have been kind of like experimenting with on and off for the past like couple of years or so. Like you can like play a bunch of kaijus, you can play Fairy Tale Luna and then like search another Luna. With this card you can like draw another card. It's like interesting. Would this see play in that deck? I'm not entirely sure because like you have to draw like both of them in tandem with one another, and this is kind of like it doesn't do anything by itself. So unsure on how good it is, and I'm not entirely sure of like the familiar possessed archetype in general. Notably also the Charmer extra deck monsters like Hita, and Asa the Earth Charmer and Wind the Wind Charmer. We're getting a water one too in Tyranny Code, I believe. So yeah, these also would trigger this thing, but I don't think that people would play this card specifically for those cards, but it's something to think about for sure. Next up, we got Card of Spirit, or it's going to be called Card of Fate in the TCG. So this card reads, each player chooses one card from the deck, then chooses 4 random cards from their opponent's deck, and if they do, each player shuffles the 5 cards chosen from their deck, randomly shows one to add to their hand, and shuffles the rest back into their deck. So it's like a really weird version of Painful Choice that affects both players, I guess. That's kind of like the closest equivalent I can come up with. So it's interesting because like, assuming that you don't play like any garnets or any dead cards, your opponent will be able to give you something generally that's going to be beneficial. It's kind of rough though because like there's always going to be certain cards like where you're activating this and like you'll get a card that's just not useful to you. It's just not a reliable option, and also like your opponent gets a plus out of it, so like it's a -1 to activate. So probably would not recommend this one. Next up, we got some cubic cards. I'm also not very familiar with the cubic archetype. I'm not familiar with many of the archetypes actually that are getting a lot of support. Malefic's got support as well, as did Speedroids, but I'll do my best here. So we got Cubic Ascension, which reads, when an opponent's monster declares an attack, special summon 1 VGem the Cubic Seed from your deck, and if you do, change the attack target to it and perform damage calculation. If your opponent's life points is at least 2,000 higher than yours, you can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon 1 VGem the Cubic Seed from hand, deck, or grave. Then, if only your opponent controlled a monster when you activate this effect, you can also special summon up to 2 more VGem the Cubic Seed. And you can only use this effect once per turn. So VGem, as far as I'm aware, is like, is this the one that can't be destroyed by battle? Yeah, it is. All right, so I know a lot of the cubic cards revolve around this card. I'm not going to pretend to know that what these cards do though, so I can't really comment on these. If any of you cubic experts in the comments have anything to say, please do let me know. This one it got changed to Cubic Casualty, I believe. And this one reads, place cubic counters on a face-up monsters your opponent controls up to the number of cubic monsters you control. Monsters with a cubic counter cannot attack, also negate their effects. You can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one cubic monster you control. Each time it destroys a monster with a cubic counter by battle, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the destroyed monster's original attack. So the interesting thing, I guess, about Ascension is like the graveyard effect requires you to have more life points than you, but like this deck focuses a lot on dealing massive damage. Like you have Crimson Nova, which like burns each player for 3k in the end phase. It's like a huge beater. And then you have like these things that like try and enable you to inflict more battle damage and stuff. Like there's like, I think Cubic Wave is the card that allows you to like boost your cubic monster's attack by like a significant portion. So yeah, but these are all sendable off of the Duza, the one that lets you Foolish Burial Goods or Foolish Burial any cubic card, which is pretty good. So I guess they have utility. This is a trap trick target as well. I'm noticing these are both trap trick targets. So I guess that's interesting. I've seen builds incorporate Magician Souls into this deck to try and like get more value, which is also maybe an interesting option if you are a cubic player. But I'm not going to spend too much time on the cubic cards because I, again, don't really know too much about the archetypes. So we're just going to go ahead and quickly read Dharma, which reads, you take no battle damage from attacks involving your cubic monsters. You can only use the effect of, or each effective cubic Dharma once per turn. During your main phase, you can send one cubic card from your hand to the grave, and if you do, draw one. You can banish this card from your grave, then target one cubic monster in your grave, add it to your hand. So seems pretty good to me, honestly. They can send another copy of itself, so it doesn't like clog in multiples. Just like more consistency, which I feel like that deck, I'm not sure if it struggles with consistency, but this would definitely help out, at least to an extent, so it's pretty good. I know they have, I believe it's Cubic Karma, that's like the Rhoda from Grave. Like you banish it, like you summon Duza, you send it, and then like you banish it to search any cubic card, I believe. So I guess just more ways to have consistency is pretty good. Well, you could always just use this effect and then send it away from Magician Souls. So that's also something interesting. But anyways, moving on here, we got Enema's Judgment. So when your opponent special summons a monster, destroy that monster, and then you can banish 5 zombies from your graveyard. And if you do special summon a level 7 or higher zombie monster from your hand or deck, like you can tutor out Balordrock with this, but like you can search Balordrock a lot easier than this card. I don't think this card will honestly see a lot of play. It also requires your opponent to like take action as opposed to you just setting up like a Glow Up Bloom or Necro World Banshee play, or like both, you know. I think that's a lot more reliable to just play zombies the way they are personally. So yeah. Next up, we got Festive Flame, which is going to be called Firebrand Hymnist, which I'll put up here, I guess. So this card reads, when this card is normal summoned, you can send cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the grave equal to the number of cards you control. If this card is special summoned, you can send cards from the top of your deck to the grave equal to the number of cards your opponent controls. You can only use this effect, Festive Flame, once per turn. So I think the second effect would be more interesting than the first one because we're not trying to play Empty Jar in 2020. But yeah, this card is pretty interesting like as a go second option. The problem is like actually enabling it. I'm not really sure if there's like any good like fire or pyro support that can actually special this card out like efficiently, and I'm not sure if I would go to the extreme of like using Dugaris or Monster Reborn or like Back to the Front of Call the Haunted for this card. I don't think I would go that far just for a couple of mills. It's also like highly dependent on what deck your opponent's playing too. So it's an interesting card, but I don't think it would see play. It does have 200 defense, so that like you could, I guess, especially off like Rekindling and stuff. So that's pretty cool. I just thought of that. But yeah, I don't really think that this is going to see a lot of play, but it could be interesting. Maybe you could play it in like Ovals or something. Next up, we got Graveyard of Wandering Souls. If your monster is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard while this card is already face up in your spell and trap zone, special summon 1 Fireball token, Pyro, Fire, level 1 attack, and defense, both 100. And if a monster is sent from your hand and or field to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect while this card is already face up in your spell and trap zone, special summon as many Fireball tokens as possible up to the number of monsters sent. You can only use this effect of Graveyard of Wandering Souls once per turn. So 2 things I'm noticing right away is, first off, the monster destroyed by battle effect isn't once per turn because only the second effect is a hard once per turn. So that's pretty interesting. If you have like multiples of these up, and if you have multiple monsters destroyed, then you can summon like a bunch of tokens. And basically like you'll never die. Generally like it would be a pretty good wall. The other thing that I'm noticing with this card is that you have to preemptively flip it up because it specifies that it already has to be face up in your spell and trap zone to use either of its effects. So it's kind of telegraphed, and I don't think it's readily searchable either, but it's an interesting option. If your tokens actually do manage to survive, then you can definitely go ahead and perform a lot of link summoning plays. So maybe it's interesting for like slower, like floaty decks. Not really sure what could make use of this card though. So it's interesting. Next we got, it's not going to be called Goldfish Rescue, but it's actually going to be called Kingyo Sukui, or I can't pronounce this, I'm sorry. But it translates basically to the same thing. They just actually use the Japanese name, which is interesting. But this is another continuous trap that reads, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard, excavate the top card of your deck, and if it is a monster with the same attribute as that target, add it to your hand. And if you do, shuffle that target into the deck. Otherwise, send the excavated card to the graveyard, and if you do, destroy this card. You can only use this effect of Goldfish Rescue once per turn. It's interesting. I don't think it's very good because if you excavate a spell or trap, it just automatically dies and it doesn't do anything. Like you could, I guess, use it for milling if you wanted to, or you can use it for graveyard disruption, but it just doesn't seem like a very good card in my opinion. Next up, we got a lot of Malefic cards, and if I didn't know anything about keyblade cards, I know even less about Malefic cards, so I'm not even going to attempt to know anything about this archetype whatsoever. I just know that like they revolve around field spells and like they can special summon big dudes, and that's about it. Alright, so Malefic Divide is a quick play spell that says target a Malefic monster in your graveyard, special summon it, ignoring its summoning conditions, but negates effects, and also banish it during the end phase. Seems fine. Like you can go for Xyz plays, Synchro plays. I know like they're getting or they have a tuner in their archetype, I believe, Parallel Gear, and this is Paradox Gear here, which is not a tuner, but it's a level 1 Dark Machine. 0 attack and defense, you can machine dupe this, I guess. So it says if a field spell is face up on the field, you can tribute this card, special summon 1 Malefic Parallel Gear from your deck. There we go. Then add 1 Malefic monster from your deck to your hand except itself. If you would banish the monster, special summon a Malefic monster from your hand using its own procedure, you can banish this card from your field or grave instead. Oh, that's actually pretty cool. So like I know a lot of people would play like Malefic Cyber End Dragon or like Malefic Stardust Dragon, just as like additional, maybe like extenders or bodies or whatever. But like if you're playing a pure Malefic deck, I guess this is pretty good. It's a +1, and it allows you to like use your Malefics easier, I guess. It's not bad. So yeah, pretty interesting. Then we got Malefic Selector, which is a normal spell that reads banish 2 Malefic cards from your graveyard, add to your deck from your deck to your hand 2 Malefic cards with different names from each other and those banished cards, except Malefic Selector. So it is a +1, but it requires a fair amount of setup, and I'm not sure how much Malefics have. So this is kind of like, if Malefics were good, this card would be insane. But I don't know how good Malefics are as a pure strategy. I'm sorry. Next up, we got the continuous spell, Malefic Territory. When this card is activated, you can activate 1 Malefic World directly from your deck, and if you do, neither player can target cards in the field zones with card effects while that card is in the field zone, even if this card leaves the field. The effect, there can be only one face-up Malefic monster on the field of Malefic monsters, becomes there cannot be Malefic monsters on the field with the same name. Okay, and negate the effects of Malefic monsters on the field during the battle phase only. Interesting card. From what I know, Malefic World's not even a field spell that Malefic players run. Because like, I think all it does is allows you to like add a Malefic in the draw phase or something instead of conducting your normal draw, something like that. I know people like in pure Malefics would run stuff like Necro Valley, which is generally a lot better than this or than that card. I feel like this card kind of just, I don't know. I guess it's interesting because like you can control multiple Malefics. Because I'm assuming that like there can be only one face Malefic monster is another like common theme of the archetype. So I guess it just like helps make you or allow you to spam the board, because I know they are pretty big monsters. So I guess you're just trying to reduce this down to a beatdown strategy, which is kind of disappointing, but that's it. It is what it is. Next up, we got Malefic Toon. So if a face-up Malefic monster or monsters you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, or opponent's card effect, draw 2 cards. Oh, that's pretty good. If a face-up Malefic monster you control is destroyed by battle, all those cards in your graveyard except during the damage step, or except by battle, okay. You can banish this card from your graveyard, add one Malefic monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect once, or each effect once per turn. So you can destroy these by your own card effects, which is interesting. I don't know how you would use that, like metal foes. I don't know. But I guess you can like trap trick into this for like the first effect, which is pretty interesting. Not a bad card. I feel like these cards aren't bad. I just think the archetype itself that it supports is also just not very good. Alright, next up we got Rosebell of Revelation. Add one plant monster with 2400 or more attack from your deck to your hand. You can banish this card from your graveyard, special summon one plant monster with 2400 or more attack from your hand. You can only use one Rosebell of Revelation effect per turn and only once that turn. Obviously this restriction is there because otherwise you'd just be able to summon out whatever you immediately just searched, so I guess it makes sense. Cards that you can special off this, I'm thinking like Gigaplant is one of the things, and there's like the Generator Plant, I think. Does that have more than 2400 attack? I actually don't know. This one. It does, yeah, so you could add this off of the Rosebell, so I guess that's interesting for you Generator players out there. Yeah, actually, let's take a look at plant monsters with 2400 or more attack. Yeah, Gigaplant. You can add Hermitry. You could add Titanial. You could add. There's not actually that many good targets actually. Or Romage Bergamot. Yes. Yeah, I probably the best targets would be Gigaplant and the Generator one. I guess that's interesting. Next up, we have Speedroid Hexa Saucer. It's a pendulum, level 4 wind machine, scale 6. You can target one of your wind Synchro monsters that is banished or in your graveyard, return it to the extra deck. Okay. But monster effect, both players take any battle damage from attacks involving this card. Any battle damage a player takes from attacks involving this card is halved. If this card in a pendulum zone is destroyed, you can special summon one face-up Speedroid pendulum monster from your extra deck. So I guess it could special itself, and it's not once per turn, so it's interesting. I don't really know how many pendulum monsters Speedroids have. I know they're a Synchro focused archetype, so I'm not really sure how useful this is. Again, I'm not an expert on this archetype either, so you guys can feel free to let me know if this is like a game changer or anything. Same with this card, Speedroid Marble Machine. It's a scale 1 level 2 wind with 200 attack, 100 defense. Pendulum effect, once per turn, when your defense position monster is targeted for an attack, you can change that monster to attack position. Also, it cannot be destroyed by battle this turn. Okay. When discarded normal summon, you can add one Speedroid monster from your deck to your hand. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except wind monsters. That's pretty good. You can splash this, I guess, with like with Wind Witches, because they also lock you into wind monsters. So that's something to consider. It's just a Rhoda, so you can like grab Takatomborg. I don't know if this is like a combo by itself. If it was, then that'd be pretty cool. But yeah. And then lastly, for the non-extra deck cards, because this is a very link heavy focused pack, as you can see, this isn't even all of the extra deck imports. I ran out of space. I had to make another dueling book deck here. But anyways, we got Synchro Transcend here, which is the last card of the main deck cards. So we got a quick play spell. I can't even speak right now. It says target one Synchro monster your opponent controls. Special summon one Synchro monster from your extra deck that is one level higher than that monster, but it cannot activate its effects this turn. You can only activate one Synchro Transcend per turn. Interesting. I don't think it's very good. It's very conditional, and it relies on your opponent to have specifically Synchro monsters. It's like Ally of Justice, you know, you have to rely on your opponent running a specific type of deck. Not very useful in my opinion. All right, now we got the extra deck cards. So we got Abyss Actor Hyper Director, link 1 for Abyss Actors. Acquires an Abyss Actor Pendulum monster. You can target one card in your Pendulum zone, special summon it, then place one Abyss Actor Pendulum monster, with a different name from that special summon monster. From your deck or face of extra deck in your Pendulum zone. Also, you cannot normally special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except Abyss Actors. From what I know, a lot of the Abyss Actors have that restriction, so like the archetypes are already pretty xenophobic, as it would be. So yeah, this is pretty good. It's just a straight up plus, which is pretty nice. Yeah, it's also link 1, so it's like really easy to make and stuff. Next up, we got Alien Shock Trooper. It's going to be called M Frame, I believe, not Mighty Frame. It requires 2 reptiles. Quick effect, you can discard 1 monster, place 8 counters on face-up monsters on the field equal to the original level of the discarded monster. If this card is destroyed by battle, a card effect, and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon reptile monsters with different names from your graveyard, except link monsters, up to the number of monsters your opponent controls with 8 counters. That's pretty good. I think the archetype had difficulty spreading 8 counters previously, and the 8 counter effects are not bad. I know like there are builds of aliens like in the past. Like aliens used to be a pretty decent rogue deck from what I know, and they had like synchro plays as well. But I don't think any of the builds really revolved around like a control play style with 8 counters. So this is like an interesting dynamic. It's also like reasonably generic. Like you can splash in like I guess Kage to Kage or whatever other reptile support you want, and does this make Snake Rain broken? I don't know, maybe. But you have to have pretty good setup in order for this to actually like pop off. So not entirely sure how like game changing this is, but like it definitely boosts the archetype like in ways that other cards I guess probably wouldn't. It's interesting that this archetype's still getting support. It got another support card not too long ago, a couple years ago, so that's pretty interesting as well. Now, next up, we got Ancient Gear. It's called Ballista, not Ballistic Shooter, because Konami is not going to put Shooter in a card name. But anyways, we got 2 Earth Machine monsters, so I guess this also works for like Infinitrax. And what else is Earth Machines? Trains, yeah, trains, obviously. So pretty good. If this card is link summoned, you can add 1 Ancient Gear monster or Gear Town from deck to hand. You can target 1 spell or trap you control and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Destroy that card you control, and if you do, change that opponent's monster's attack and defense to 0 until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Ancient Gear Ballistic Shooter once per turn. So this is pretty cool for Ancient Gear specifically, obviously, because like the idea is you add Gear Town, then you immediately pop it, you get another plus out of it, and it sets up for OTKs, which is what that deck tries to do. So pretty good. It like helps the archetype do what it does. So I don't think that's like a bad thing at all. And outside of Ancient Gear decks, I guess you can add like Box, which Box has a pretty wide search pool. So you can do interesting stuff with this in other decks. I wouldn't be surprised to see this in like Trains or Infinitrax or whatever. Arrows are kind of awkward, but like it still has 1 downpouring arrow, so not too bad. Next up, we got Armor Vial, the Star Guide Dragon, which I believe is going to be changed to Armilier, the Star Leader Dragon. I'll put it up here. Yeah, Armilier, the Star Leader Dragon. Okay, so this is a Dark Dragon Link monster. So could maybe work out in the Rocket Dragon Link deck. We'll see what it is because I actually don't know what it does. 2 effect monsters cannot be used as link material. All right, that might make things a little harder. You can target 1 face-up monster this card points to. Special summon 1 monster from your hand in defense position with the same original level as that monster to your zone this card points to, but negates effects. Okay, so it's not actually like a dragon support card. It's interesting. I guess like if you need like if you're playing a deck that like has difficulty getting its cards onto the board, I guess, but I don't think it's a bad card. It's just I'm not really sure what it accomplishes and what decks it really supports, but it's very intriguing. All right, next up we got Artifact Dagda. I'm very, very surprised this card got imported because this card is insane. So this card just requires 2 monsters with different names, and it reads, when the effect of another card on the field is activated as a quick effect, you can set 1 artifact monster from your hand or deck to your spell and trap zone as a spell, but destroy it during your opponent's next end phase. If this link summon card is destroyed during your opponent's turn, you can special summon an artifact monster from your grave in defense position. You can only use each effect of Dagda once per turn. The second effect doesn't really matter. What matters is that it literally, you can breathe on your board and it gets you Scythe from your deck. And if you have any capability of making Tornado Dragon or like some other way to pop your artifact, you just instantly get Scythe every single time. It's crazy. Like you can play this in a lot of different decks, and obviously the one that comes to mind for me is Lunalight, and I am absolutely going to be playing this in Lunalight without question. This card is absolutely just insane. There's like very, very little ways to like deal with it because you can't like Ash it or anything. So like your opponent has to, it demands a response, otherwise like your opponent's just gonna get scythed, which is just crazy. All right, next up we got the Melodious Link monster. Bloom Harmonist, the Melodious Composer instead of Virtuoso. Link 2 with 1000 attack, requiring 2 fairy monsters. If this card is link summoned, you can discard one card, special summon 2 Melodious monsters with different levels from your deck in defense position to your zones this card points to. You can't special summon monsters. The turn you activate this effect except Melodious monsters. You can only use this effect to Bloom Harness once per turn. If a Melodious monster, this card points to attacks, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. This card is obviously just it locks you into the Melodious archetype, so it's basically just doing the same linear game plan that like pure Melodious tries to do, which I don't think is very good. Obviously what you're meant to do is summon Aria Elegy and like hope the soft wall gets you there, but in most cases it won't, because a lot of decks have outs. Like non-targeting removal is not too hard to come by. Like you think of like Ningirsu, Borlo, Dragon, like if people are citing Kaijus in any format, that just instantly defeats this strategy. And then like some in-archetypal cards like Ningirsu, for example. So yeah, this card, it just promotes the same like sort of it's not even like stun, it just kind of sit there and you just hope that it's good enough, but it's not really conducive to anything new, which is funny because it requires fairies, implying that like you would use other monsters to make it, but it was actually for the entire turn, not just after you use this, like not for the rest of the turn. So it's very, I don't know, it's fine if that's what you want to do, and on a casual level it'll probably be okay, but yeah, just Melodious will always have that problem of relying on that soft lock, which is generally not going to be enough in most cases. Next up, we got the Bujin link, Bujinki Awashima. So this points up and bottom right, which is pretty interesting. 1500 attack, requires 2 monsters with the same level. So you can't use like Xyz or other link monsters, has to be just regular monsters with levels. Cannot be used as link material. If this card is link summoned, you can special summon 2 monsters with the same level, one from your hand and one from grave, but negate their effects if any, and if you do immediately after this effect resolves, Xyz summon 1 Xyz monster using only those 2 monsters. If an Xyz monster this card points to detaches its material or materials to activate an effect, you can target a spell or trap your opponent controls and destroy it. You can only use each effect once per turn. So this is alright. The only like real thing that I have is that it uses resources from your hand, so you're not really like, getting a lot of advantage from it. Like presumably the material from grave that you're using is one of the ones that you used to link summon this in the first place, so that's not too bad. Its errors are really awkward, but for Master Rule 5 this is probably fine, obviously, so that's actually alright. It's not a bad card. I don't think it's as much of a Bujin card, it's just like a kind of a generic card. Could be useful because it kind of just is a spell and trap card. It's a spell and trap pop as well, so it could be good in other decks that don't really have as much access to that. So not a bad card for sure. I'm not sure if it will see a lot of widespread play, but it's definitely pretty good, I think, to just have lying around in case it actually does come up. Next up, we got Condemned Darklord. So this is another link 2 that points bottom left, bottom right. 1600 attack, requires 2 fairy monsters, and you can tribute summon a fairy monster that requires 2 tributes by banishing 2 monsters from your grave instead of tributing it, and it's still treated as a tribute summon. You can discard a card and take a Darklord monster from your deck and either add it to your hand or send it to the grave. You can only use this effect of Condemned Darklord once per turn, and during your end phase once per turn, you can gain 500 for each fairy monster on the field. So this is pretty good for Darklords, I think. It's relatively synergistic. The fact that it's not a starter because you have to be able to play the game like in the first place, but the deck runs a lot of like turbo draw cards like Allure of Darkness, Trade-In, and Paw of Desires to my knowledge, and I'm pretty sure you can get this fairly easily, and it just allows you to extend even further because you can just get any monster you want. Like you can get like Ixchel if you hadn't used it yet, or you can get like Nastin, you can get whatever. I actually like know a little bit about Darklords, but yeah, the cool thing is that if you don't need your normal summon to make this, like say you got like a Superbia off of the I forget the Reborn spell name, but they have a themed monster Reborn, but like you get Superbia and like you can summon another guy. You can go ahead and make this, and then if you have something like say an Archlord Christia, you can just put it on the field by banishing the 2 monsters used to make this. So that's pretty good. So something to think about. It's not bad. It's good for the archetype, and it complements it pretty well. I'm not sure if Darklords will see meta relevance, but it's good that they have this at their disposal. Next up, we got Crossroads Dragon. This is a Dark Dragon Link 2 that points to the left and bottom, 800 attack. 2 monsters with different types. During the main phase, as a quick effect, you contribute this card and 1 plant monster. Special summon 1 rose synchro monster or 1 plant synchro monster from your extra deck, which is treated as a synchro summon. If a monster or monsters you control is destroyed by card effect while this card is in your graveyard, you can banish this card from your grave. Special summon a rose dragon monster from your grave. You can only use each effect of Crossroads dragon once per turn. So this is pretty... it's pretty apparent that this is made for the Rose Dragon deck. We got a bunch of support last year in the Legendary Duelist Sisters of the Rose set. So, with like Frozen Rose and like the White Rose Dragon and like the Garden Rose Maiden and all those cards, you can make this pretty easily, I feel, because they run a lot of dragons and plants, so you can make this pretty well. And you have no problem proccing its effect. So like you can tribute this card and a plant to be able to summon like a Black Rose Dragon. Since it's treated as a synchro summon, Black Rose can blow up the field, and then you can proc its second effect when a monster is destroyed, because you're going to destroy your own Black Rose with its own effect. So you can like banish it and summon something back. So pretty good as a combo extender. I'm not sure exactly what the deck is able to do in Master Duel 5. I'm pretty sure Needle Fiber also helps, which we're going to get to next. But yeah, this is definitely good for the players who are playing Rose Dragons. So pretty exciting stuff for them. Next up, we got Crystron and Needle Fiber, or halqifibrax. I'm just going to call it Fiber or Fibrax. It's too many syllables. But anyways, it requires... If you guys don't know what this card does, you've probably been living under a rock, but I'll just go over it in case. So we got 2 monsters, including at least 1 tuner to make it. If this card is link summoned, you can special summon 1 level 3 or lower tuner monster from your hand or deck in defense position, but it cannot activate its effects this turn, and that specifies on the field. So like you can activate graveyard effects, of course. And during your opponent's main or battle phase, as a quick effect, you can banish this card, special summon a tuner synchro monster from your extra deck, which is also treated as a synchro summon, and you can only use each effect of Fiber once per turn, or Fibrax once per turn. So yeah, this card summons out things like Jet Synchron, Glow Up Bulb, Steam the Cloak, all those types of cards. You can summon like archetype specific tuners like Rocket Synchron. You can summon things like the Churia Rose Whip if you want to like have a soft floodgate on the board. There's a lot of like really cool things you can do with this, obviously, and it's just an insane combo extender. Not really much to say about this. And there's a lot of cool things you can summon on your opponent's turn. If you leave it on the field, you can summon like Wonder Magician, which pops a card on Synchro Summon, because again it's treated as Synchro Summon. And like these types of cards you can also like quick synchro afterwards. You can like go into Dawn Dragster or Omega or Borrowed Savage, like all of those types of cards, which is also like really good for extending your plays. Another good card you can go into with Fibrax is Desert Locusts, which is a TCG exclusive card. But basically this card allows you to rip a card out of your opponent's hand because you're doing it on your opponent's turn. And it also has a quick synchro effect, so you can go into some of those aforementioned synchros that I mentioned with Wonder Magician. So those are some good options that you can play if you have like the extra deck space. A deck that comes to mind with that would be like Dinos. I'm pretty sure Dinos have the space to incorporate like Desert Locusts or like Wonder Magician or whatever. And a lot of decks can use this card, obviously, both rogue and meta alike. So it'll definitely see a lot of play, obviously, until it possibly gets hit on the FNL list. So next up, we got the DDD link, which is Abyss King Gilgamesh. He points bottom left, bottom right, is a 1800 attack fiend, requires 2 DD monsters, and if this card is special summoned, you can activate this effect. You cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except DD monsters. Also, place 2 DD pendulum monsters with different names from your deck in your pendulum zones, and if you do, take 1000 damage. If this link summon card in its owner's control is destroyed by your opponent's attacker card effect, you can special summon 1 DD monster from your extra deck or graveyard in defense position, and you can only use each effect of Gilgamesh once per turn. So obviously, it locks you into your archetype, but it locks you in for the rest of the turn, unlike something like Bloom Harmonist. So he allows you to kind of like go ahead and make something like Needle Fiber beforehand, and then go into Gilgamesh afterward if you want to, which is not that bad, because setting up pendulum monsters is pretty good. You have good targets like Ragnarok and Thomas, those types of cards, which is pretty nice for allowing you to just keep comboing off. And this is like one of the cards that DDDs definitely would appreciate. I'm not sure if it would propel them back up to the short-lived meta status that they once had, but it's a very nice boost alongside Needle Fiber or Fibrax or whatever. So yeah, that's pretty good for them. Next, we have a fusion monster that I didn't even know existed until the reveals came in. I had to like look at this, and I already forget what it does. So, Dangerous Frightfur Nightmare. It's a level, what is this? Level 10 Dark Fusion monster. Fiend type, 2000 attack, 3000 defense. Requires edge monster, or 1 edge monster, and 2 Fluffle monsters. Gains 300 attack for each fairy and fiend monster in your graveyard during your turn only. When this fusion summon monster destroys a monster by battle, you can send Frightfur, Fluffle, and/or Edge monsters from your deck to the graveyard equal to the destroyed monster's level. When your opponent activates a card or effect that targets face-up card in the field as a quick effect, you can banish 1 Frightfur monster from your extra deck and negate that effect. So the protection effect is alright. Probably not going to be used a lot if your opponent, can read this card and just see that it's not going to be worth it to target this card. So it's pretty nice though, because like your opponent still has to be able to out it, which can be pretty hard if your opponent doesn't have like a way to get over it. It kind of sucks that the attack boost is only during your turn because it makes it easier to run over. But the second effect is also pretty cool, where even though like you can only destroy monsters by levels in order to proc it, or with levels in order to proc it, still allows you to send things like Edgem Chain to be able to like search something like Frightfur Fusion, which it sets up your graveyard already, so that's pretty good. Or you can just search another Patchwork. You can get like Wings in the Grave to be able to like send toy vendors, draw cards, etc. And it's just nice to be able to like set up the graveyard even further. I don't think there's like a direct way to set up your graveyard as efficiently as this card does. And even though like the archetype isn't focused on just having a lot of resources in grave, you can be able to send useful things. Another thing is like sabers, just be able to have that in there so you can recur it and do more fusion plays, etc. Just really good stuff. I think this card is pretty good for the archetype. I don't think that Fluffles run a lot of non-fusion monsters, especially post Master Rule 5. So this will be a nice like one-of if they want to incorporate. I don't think it's a bad card. Next up, we got Dark Anthelian Dragon, which is a rank 7 Xyz Pendulum monster with scale 10. So yeah, once per turn in its Pendulum effect, you can target a face-up monster opponent controls. Its original attack becomes halved until the end of this turn. That's alright, I guess. Then its monster effect requires obviously 2 level 7 monsters. It's generic. If you can Pendulum summon level 7, you can Pendulum summon this face-up card in your extra deck. Most of the Pendulum extra deck hybrids like Synchro Pendulums or Xyz Pendulums have this effect, or Fusion Pendulums. Once per turn, as a quick effect, you can attach a material from this card, then target a face-up monster your opponent controls until the end of this turn. Its attack becomes half its original attack, and if it does, this card gains that lost attack, so it's like a Dark Rebellion as a quick effect. I mean, these effects are like fine, but they're just not really relevant in the current metagame. But if this card in the monster zone is destroyed by battle card effect, you can just put it into scale. So it's like just a big chonker. It doesn't really do anything else. I don't really know what Pendulum decks run a lot of level 7s, maybe like Metal Foes or something to that extent. I guess like Endymion can technically play this, but like there's no real reason to play this. It doesn't really offer anything. Like Pendulum decks don't really struggle to get over monsters, so I don't think this will really see play. It's probably an anime card if I had to guess, but I don't know. I don't really watch any of the anime. Next up, we got Mighty Flame Swordsman, or I believe we have, it's going to be called Ferocious Flame Swordsman in the TCG. So it's a Fire Link 2 that points left and bottom right, 1300 attack warrior. 2 monsters with different names as its materials. All warrior monsters on the field gain 500 attack. If this Link Summon card you control is destroyed by battle or an opponent's card effect, you can target a warrior non-link monster in your graveyard, special summon it, but banish it when it leaves the field. And this is a hard one per turn. It's generic, which is pretty cool, I guess, but it doesn't really do a whole lot. If you want warrior support, just play a Soul. That's all I'm really going to say about this one. Next, we have 5-headed Link Dragon. So this is the big boss monster, the Link 5, that requires 5 monsters. So you have to have specifically 5 monsters, not like 3+ or 4+ or anything like that. Must be Link Summoned, so you can't like Waking the Dragon this thing out. If this card is Link Summoned using Dark, Earth, Water, Fire, and Wind monsters as material, you can destroy all cards your opponent controls. It's unaffected by other cards' effects and cannot be destroyed by battle with Dark, Earth, Water, Fire, or Wind monster. And then once per turn during your opponent's end phase, as a maintenance cost, banish 5 cards from your graveyard face down. And if you cannot, send this card to the grave. So it's good as a finisher. It's really hard to out. And the first effect of like popping your opponent's entire board is cool, but probably impractical. I can't really think of many decks that can actually get all these attributes out on the field at once and then just link into this thing. I guess maybe like Adignisters could do it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, like you can just put this on the board if you're playing a deck that can like make this. You don't even have to use it like this effect. You can just make it with 5 monsters and just have a big 5k beat stick that can't be affected by card effects and probably won't be run over by battle, which is pretty good. And you're always going to be able to pay the maintenance cost at least once, assuming no graveyard disruption, because you'll have the 5 monsters in your graveyard to be able to banish, because it requires 5 specifically and not like, again, not like 3+. So you'll have it for at least another turn, so it's a good, pretty decent finisher. But would you play this over something like Borosaur that's more generic? In most cases, I would think not. But if you have a lot of extra deck space, I think this is something that's like totally okay to run if you wanted to have the style points more than anything, I suppose. Alright, so next up we got the Herald of Mirage Light, which is what its name in the TCG is. It's a light fairy, link 2 points bottom up, bottom right, with only 600 attack, which will be relevant for its effect. So it requires 2 monsters with the same type and attribute except for tokens. And then when a spell or trap card or effect is activated as a quick effect, you can send a fairy monster from your hand to the grave to negate the activation and destroy that card. If this card in your possession is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, you can add up to 2 ritual monsters and or ritual spells with different names from your graveyard to your hand, and you can only use each effect of Herald once per turn. So this is obviously meant to complement like Herald to perfection, but I mean the first effect is kind of superfluous because Herald does the exact same thing. It is cool for the graveyard recovery, which is something that I think the deck, it's not like hurting for, but it could definitely, it definitely benefits it for sure. The thing is, it's like you'd have to play something like the Star Seraph engine in order to get this out alongside the Herald itself, and it doesn't obviously work with like incantations. So just something to think about. It might be relegated more towards like the older school type of Herald builds, but it's definitely not a bad card by any means. Alright, so next up on the list is Lib, the World Keyblade Master is what her name is. She's a light Cybers, link 2 pointing left, bottom right, 2000 attack, requiring 2 monsters, and cannot be link summoned unless there is a World Legacy card in your graveyard. During your main phase, you can set a World Legacy spell or trap directly from your deck, but if you have no World Legacy monsters in your grave, it cannot be activated this turn. If this link summon card is sent to the grave as link material, you can shuffle a card on the field into the deck. You can only use each effect of Lib once per turn. So she is kind of niche, but she can be a very, very good extender. Deck that comes to mind in my opinion is, like just on first thought, is Mech Knight, like pure Mech Knight, or any build that runs like Morningstar to search the World Legacy secret. So you can pitch a World Legacy card and then make this and then like set another thing. So that's pretty cool. You can also play this in like an Orcus build. It is a light, so it's kind of hard to like get this on board, you know, after you do your Orcus stuff. But if you can manage to get it in beforehand, like World Legacy, the World Wand obviously is a World Legacy card and a monster, so you can do stuff like set Succession if you want to. That's pretty cool. So this has potential in the future. It's probably not as good now that Ib is banned, but it's still probably like a pretty decent card. It's seeing play in the OCG, like to not like a large extent, but it is seeing play, so it's definitely a good card. Next up, we got Mecha Phantom Beast Auroradon. This is a link 3 wind machine pointing left, bottom, and bottom right. 2100 attack, requiring 2+ machine monsters. If this card is link summoned, you can special summon 3 Mega Phantom Beast tokens as machine, wind, level 3, attack and defense both 0, and you can't link summon for the rest of the turn. Once per turn, you can attribute up to 3 monsters and apply the appropriate effect. You can either non-target destroy a card in the field, which is pretty good, special summon a Mecha Phantom Beast monster from your deck, or add a spell or trap, from your graveyard to your hand if you attribute 3. So most of the time, if you would like to use the other effect, probably going to use the 1 effect, because you know, just being able to out cards going second is pretty nice. Obviously, you're locked into non-link summoning, which is good because otherwise this would just be a Phantom Sky Blaster 2.0. And yeah, it's good for like synchro decks. I think Lithium posted a Karakuri synchro build with this card a while back. So yeah, this definitely can be pretty nice. Like you can also tutor out something like a O-Lion if you wanted to. So, you know, has some potential applications, but it locking you out of link summoning makes it a bit niche in its application. Alright, next we got Ojama Emperor. We got the, you know, the link 3, like the beast himself. He's got all down pointing arrows, so the best arrows ever on a link 3. 3 beast monsters, including an Ojama monster. While an Ojama country is in a field zone, this card gains 3000 attack, and it also cannot be destroyed by card effects. Your opponent takes any battle damage that you would have taken from attack on this card. You can target one Ojama non-link monster in your graveyard, special summon it, and also you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except for fusion monsters. And you can only use this effect as a hard once per turn. So, does this make Ojama's tier 0? Yes, definitely. No, I'm kidding. But like you can make this relatively easily with the Ojama support that we received a while back. There's also still stuff like Rescue Cat as well to be able to just like get into these cards. I guess the other effect is intended to like summon back like Ojama King or Ojama Knight and try and get that lock going. But I mean, if you pull that off, I guess like you're in a good position. But most of the time, you know, you're just playing Ojamas with like ABC or something, I would assume. So next up, we got Phantasm Emperor Trilojig. This is a big level 10 fusion requiring 3 level 10 monsters. It's 4,000 attack and defense. If this card is special summoned, or if another monster is special summoned from the graveyard to your field while this monster is on the field, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls, inflict damage equal to half its original attack. You can only use this effect once per turn. High investment, I guess you can trigger it off something like Waking the Dragon because it just triggers on special summon and like doesn't have that summoning condition. The only deck that comes to mind with level 10s is Trains, and I highly doubt that they would play a fusion spell to be able to make this when they could just, you know, OTK anyways. So probably not going to see play, but it's big and it does damage, I guess. Next up, we got one of the more broken cards in this set, which is Predaplant Verite Anaconda. It's a Darkling 2 plant with 500 attack. Requires just 2 effect monsters. You can target a face-up monster on the field. It becomes dark until the end of this turn, which is very relevant. You can pay 2,000 life points and send a Polymerization or a Fusion, normal or quick play spell from your deck to your graveyard. This effect becomes that spell's effect when the card is activated, and also you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn. You can only use each effect of Verite Anaconda once per turn. So the first effect is really good because you can change something to dark, send Super Poly, and then send the monster you just targeted plus this card to make Starging Venom. You can send Super Poly in any case, like if your opponent already has dark monsters, you can just clear the whole board. You can also send things like Instant Fusion to get Winda out if you have Dingirsu on the field if you're playing Orcust. You can send things like Thunder Dragon Fusion or like Cyberlord Fusion. You can send a lot of different things, so just things that get value and already contribute to your plays. I think Thunder is a pretty sleeper pick as it is right now, and even though it's like not, you know, super competitive, it did do fairly well at Utrecht this past weekend or the weekend before, I can't remember already, but it did pretty well at Utrecht. And yeah, like this card allows you to just get Titan as well as just bin your Thunder Dragon Fusion, which gets you more follow-up plays, which is pretty good. And this card is obviously going to be broken once Dragoon comes out, but thankfully that card is not out yet because that card would just single-handedly warp the format and make it completely unfun to play. So I hope that we don't get that card. But anyways, next up we got, it's going to be called Protector Whelp of the Destruction Swordsman. Requires just 2 monsters. If this card is link summoned, you can send 1 Destruction Sword card from your deck to your graveyard. Then you can special summon a Buster Blader monster from your hand. At the end of your battle phase, if your opponent controls no monsters, you can target 1 Buster Blader monster that you control that did not declare an attack this turn and inflict damage to your opponent equal to its attack. You can only use each effect of Protector Whelp once per turn, so this is very good for its first effect. You can send like Prologue or the other traps, which helps you get set up for the Buster Blader lock. That lock is actually surprisingly hard for a lot of decks to out. Like they need like mostly spells and traps to be able to like deal with it, or like impermanence, things like that. So if this helps at all to, which I'm certain it does, obviously, because that's what it's designed to do, but if it helps get the combo out more consistently, then you know, this could be an interesting rogue pick to just be able to like, you know, beat decks that are unprepared for it. So that's pretty cool. Next, we have Raidraptor Wise Tricks, my personal favorite monster in this entire set, for pretty obvious reasons, I would assume. So Dark Winged Beast, Link 2 monster pointing bottom left and bottom right with 1400 attack. Requires 2 Dark Winged Beast monsters. If this card is link summoned, you can special summon 1 level 4 Dark Winged Beast monster from your deck in defense position, but it cannot be used as link material and its effects are also negated. If your Raidraptor Exceeds monster's effect is activated, set 1 Rank Up Magic spell directly from your deck, and if it is a quick play spell, it can be activated this turn, and both effects are hard runs per turn. So this is obviously really good in actually 3 decks. Raidraptors, Blackwings, and obviously Lunalights. So you make this card, you summon something like mostly Zephyros, then you can make like another Raidraptor Xyz mostly Force Strix, and then set any rank up spell. So Raidraptors have the most flexibility with the rank up spell effect, but the other two can also just set Socially Force and make Infinity. Or you can make Beatrice too, if you want to like combo extend. So yeah, this is obviously extremely good. It's kind of like Needle Fiber for, you know, the decks that can use it. It's really cool. Gets you a lot of advantage, and I'm very excited for this card because it makes Chick Tiger really good again, just on its own without extenders. So next up, we got Relinquished Anima, which is a really cool card. So we got one level 1 monster to make it, except a token. You can target one face-up monster this card points to, equip that face-up monster to this card, maximum 1. You can only use this effect of Relinquished Anima once per turn, and this card gains attack equal to the equipped monsters. So really good in decks like Altergeist. You can just summon Malefic and then make this going second. You can like steal something, Search Faker, good stuff. It's just another option like Linkuriboh. It just can't use tokens, which is, you know, kind of unfortunate. So it just kind of depends. Like Linkuriboh is obviously more versatile, but this allows you to play going second, which is pretty cool if your opponent is not wary of where they put their things. So yeah, next up we got Reptilian Echidna. Link 2 Dark Reptile with 200 attack, pointing left and bottom right, excuse me. It requires 2 monsters, including a reptile monster. If this card is link summoned, you can target a face-up monster your opponent controls, change its attack to 0. During your main phase, you can add reptile monsters with different names from your deck to your hand up to the number of monsters your opponent controls with 0 attack, and you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn except reptiles. You can only use each effect once per turn. So can get you a lot of pluses, which is really good. And Reptilian is already all about getting, you know, 0 attack monsters on the field, so it's nice. I'm pretty sure you have a boss monster called Vasky that can like tribute like monsters from either player's field with 0 attack. So you can search Vasky and then like tribute over a problematic monster. It's pretty good. And yeah, they also got other support, I believe, not too long ago. So yeah, it's interesting to see this deck still get support. Next up, we got Selene, the Sacred Sovereign of Magic. This is a Link 3 bottom left and bottom right light monster, spellcaster, 1850 attack. Requires 2+ monsters, including a spellcaster. If this card is link summoned, place spell counters on this card equal to the number of spells on the field and in the graveyard. While an Endymion card is on the field, your opponent monsters cannot target this card for attacks. Once per turn during the main phase, you can remove 3 spell counters from your field and special summon a spellcaster monster from your hand or graveyard in defense to your zone this card points to. So this card is obviously extremely good for Endymion. I'm pretty sure Triff already made a video about this card. And yeah, this card is pretty insane. Like you can just summon back like Mighty Masters, you can summon back like Jackal King, you can summon back pretty much any like of your negates that are cleared, or like you can overlay. In this video he like overlaid into like Absolute Dragon like Beatrice just to get like them in the graveyard to summon back off Selene. And that is a quick effect, which is really cool. You just get more negations. And it's also seen play in the OCG, or saw a little bit of play in the OCG with Spiral, because you can actually summon Masterplan from the grave with this, which is a neat thing you can do. So yeah, definitely a thing to keep in mind and to watch out for. This card is very good, and I think a little bit slept on right now. Next up, we got Simorgh, Bird of Kings. So yeah, this is another Link 3 that points bottom left, and bottom right. Winged Beast with 2400 attack. Requires 2+ monsters, including a Winged Beast. Cannot be used as link material. Your opponent cannot target this card or Winged Beast monsters this card points to with card effects. If this card would be destroyed by battle, you can destroy one Simorgh card that you control instead, and during the end phase, you can special summon one Winged Beast monster from your hand or deck whose level is equal to or lower than the number of unused spell or trap zones on the field. And you can only use this effect as a card once per turn. So this card is seeing play in the OCG, or saw a little bit of play in the OCG and stuff like Lunalights, and again like Raidraptors and Blackwings, because they can all make this card pretty easily. So what you do with this card is that you summon it in decks like Lunalights or like Raidraptors or Blackwings, and you can essentially set this up with Union Carrier, which we'll get to later. Carrier will target this, equipping a Mist Valley Thunderbird from your deck to it, and then this will summon Apex Avion during the end phase. So effectively, that's like an infinite negate combo, like pseudo infinite negate combo. And this is getting, you know, quite a lot of attention, and I think Mist Valley Thunderbirds got reasonably bought out, so that's also a thing. But I'm gonna talk a little bit more about this combo. I have a lot to say about all of these cards when it comes to like Lunalights in particular, and this is one of the options. But yeah, definitely we'll discuss more about this. I'm not going to spoil my opinions on this fully right now. Next up, we got Sky Striker Ace Sieg, or Zeke, I believe it's going to be called. So this requires 2 monsters, including a Sky Striker Ace monster. Must be link summoned. If this card is link summoned, you can target a face-up monster on the field, banish it until your opponent's next end phase. You can, once per turn, target one other card you control. This card gains 1,000 attack, and then send the targeted card to the graveyard. You always special summon Sieg or Zeke once per turn. So the fact that must be link summoned means that you can't raid tag out into it. But it's really good because it's basically just like a Farfa, and it allows you to like use things like Shark Cannon and Widow Anchor pretty effectively because it still, you know, leaves you with the striker archetype. You know, like normally what you would have to do is like link 2 and then you kind of just lose access to your striker monster engine. But this just allows you to, you know, Shark Cannon something and Widow Anchor something and then go into this and then go into like Kagari or Hayate or Suzuki or whatever. So obviously it's very beneficial and it's pretty good. Next up, we got a Pendulum fusion monster, which is Starving Venomy Lethal Dose Dragon. It's 2800 attack, skill 1, level 8 Dark Dragon. Pendulum effect is once per turn, you can place a Venomy counter on each face-up monster your opponent controls. At all face-up monsters on the field other than Dark Dragon monsters lose 200 attack for each Venomy counter. And this monster effect requires 3 Dark Pendulum monsters. Each time a card is sent from the field to the graveyard, place 1 Venomy counter on this card for each. All other face-up monsters on the field other than Dark Dragons lose 200. You can, for each Venomy counter, and then once per turn, you can negate the effects of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls until the end of this turn, which is actually pretty good. If this card in the monster zone is a battle or card effect, you can place this in the Pendulum zone. So, you can, I guess, technically super poly into this if you're playing Pendulum, which is kind of funny. It just kind of depends on how easily you can actually get this out. Seems kind of difficult, but also not like too bad. The question is if it's actually going to be worth it. It's a pretty cool going second option in my opinion. Okay, next we got Tenyi Spirit Sahasrara. So points up, right, bottom, and bottom right. A link 4 worm light monster with 3k attack. Requires 2+ worm monsters. While you control a face-up non-effect monster, your opponent's monsters can't target effect monsters for attacks. Also, your opponent cannot target effect monsters on the field with card effects. Quick effect, you can target effect monster your opponent controls. Special summon a Tenyi Spirit token with stats of level 4 light war monster with 0 defense and question attack. The token's attack becomes the original attack of the targeted monster. You can only use this effect once per turn. So pretty good. It spawns a non-effect monster, so you can like continue summoning, or you continue with like your non-effect support with the Tenyi cards. Not super familiar with how the Tenyi deck operates, but definitely synergizes with the deck, so that's all I'm going to say about it. I'm not going to pretend to know what the deck does. So next, I'm just going to go into the final cards. There's only 5 left. Oh, I put this one here twice. All right. Next up, we got Celestial Night Lord Parshath, or the Celestial Night Lord Parshath, I believe it's called. Link 3, pointing all downward, light fairy with 4,000, or not 4,000, excuse me, 2,400 attack. 2+ fairy monsters. You can discard a card, add the Sanctuary in the Sky, or one card that specifically lists the card Sanctuary in the Sky in its text from your deck to your hand. If this card, if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, you can add a fairy monster instead. If a face-up fairy monster you control is sent to the graveyard, you can banish a fairy monster from your graveyard. Special summon a fairy monster with a higher level than the banished monster from your hand. You can only use each effect once per turn. Seems okay. Kind of hard to get this out in something like counter fairies, but I guess you could play this in like agents if you're still playing agents. So I guess that's pretty interesting. I'm not really sure what other decks can make use of this, like with Sanctuary in the Sky being like the kind of central focal point of this card, but it's cool to have. Next up, we got another really insane card, which is Union Carrier. So points bottom and right. It's a light link 2 machine with 1,000 attack. Requires 2 monsters with the same type or attribute. Can't be used as link material during the turn this card is link summoned. You can target a face-up monster you control, equip 1 monster with the same original type or original attribute as a targeted monster from your hand or deck to it as an equipped spell that makes it gain 1,000 attack. But if you're equipped from your deck, you cannot special summon monsters with the same name as that monster card for the rest of this turn. You can only use this effect of Union Carrier once per turn. So this card is bonkers. It's crazy. You can equip stuff like Destruction Sword, or Dragon Buster Destruction Sword that locks your opponent out of the extra deck. You can equip, like I mentioned, the Mist Valley Thunderbird card. You can equip like Orcus cards to it. Just anything that has like graveyard effects. Like you can equip like Sangan or Witch of the Black Forest to search hand traps, which is cool. You just do a lot of like crazy stuff with this card, in addition to just obviously being good in ABC. But also the fact that it can't be used as link material just during that turn is pretty relevant, because that means you can actually IP with it during your opponent's turn, which is it can come up in certain instances. So that's also pretty good to keep in mind. Next up, we got extra hero, not Hell Divisor, but I believe it's Infernal Divisor. No way that Konami would ever let that name pass through translation. Requires 2 hero monsters, points bottom and bottom left. If this card is link summoned, you can reveal 1 hero fusion monster in your action deck and add up to 2 of the fusion materials with different names whose names are specifically listed on that monster to your deck, from your deck to your hand, and you're locked into hero monsters this turn, like most hero support cards. You only use this effect once per turn, and each fiend monster that this card points to gains attack and defense equal to its level times 100. So this card is obviously like really good because it has like potential to plus really hard, but a lot of the hero fusion monsters have generic materials, so that means that like you're gonna have to run either some like suboptimal fusion monsters or main deck monsters in order to incorporate this card. But there could be a build that actually uses this one day. I wouldn't be surprised. It's a very good card. And then finally, we have Yuki Onna, the Absolute Zero Mayakashi. This points left, right, bottom left, and bottom right. So this requires 2+ zombie monsters. You can only control one of it. Negate the activated effects of your opponent's monsters that were banished when that effect was activated. If the monster is special summoned from the graveyard, or if a monster effect is activated in the graveyard, you can target one other face-up monster in the field, change its attack to 0, and if you do, negate its effects. You can only use this effect up to twice per turn. So pretty good, honestly. There's a lot of decks that do special from the graveyard or have monster effects in the graveyard, so this being a negate is pretty nice. And this card is also generic to zombies, so I wouldn't be surprised if like more pure traditional like Balladrock control decks could actually like utilize this card. Yeah, with like Balladrock coming back every turn, like you can easily climb up into this and just have like additional negations on board in addition to Balladrock. So definitely could see play in those decks as a one-of. That wouldn't hurt for sure. So yeah, that's actually going to be the entirety of the OCG cards out of Duel Overload. Obviously a lot of like really powerful hard hitters, and also a lot of cards that support the road decks as well. So I think this set is really awesome, and I think that the cards are going to certainly change the format if Master Duel 2020 won't. But yeah, that's actually going to be it for this video. I apologize if in some parts of it I sounded like my voice was kind of like hoarser than other parts. I had to kind of just divide up my recording sessions because I insist on getting a video out, but I just had to cough in like every single take, so naturally that was going to make some of the audio quality worse, so I do apologize for that. But yeah, I was just dedicated to getting this video out for you guys, so that is that. But yeah, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comment section down below. Feel free to subscribe for more informative and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. If you want to, you can follow me on Discord, Twitter, or Twitch, all 3 links in the description as always. And once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, I will catch you in the next video. See you guys!